Hello, YouTube. I want to give the delusional Bruce Lee fans a little more context of the Wong Jackman fight. It's a lot of things that a lot of the fans don't know about that story. Wong Jackman and Bruce Lee fought in 1965. I believe it was August of 1965. Supposedly, the fans, for some reason, just automatically believed that Bruce Lee beat Wong Jackman. There was a few witnesses at these fights, as I said in my previous video. His wife, of course, said he won, and one other witness said he won. But then there's a whole bunch of other witnesses that said Wong Jackman won, and there were also someone who said it was a tie. So which one was it? Did Bruce win? Did Jackman win? Or was it a tie? So many people there in three different stories. So the fans just choose to believe Bruce Lee won. Why? Because he's Bruce Lee. And they think he's the same Bruce Lee that they watch in the movies who just automatically kicks anybody's butt that he fights. Yeah, totally delusion. So I'm going to give you the story. So this is my opinion, and it just makes more sense than what any delusional fan can say. It really does. So in 1965, Wong Jackman and Bruce Lee, they have a fight. But there are rules before the fight. And the stipulation to the fight is the loser stops teaching in town. No, the loser stops teaching altogether or leaves town. That was the rule. So the rule for Bruce Lee was if you lose, you don't teach anymore, or you leave San Francisco. You leave Chinatown, never to return. The rule for Wong Jackman was he stops teaching altogether. They both agree. This is in August. So after this fight and all the conflicting stories, guess what? And the same year, 1965, in September, Bruce Lee moves. He goes to live in Seattle, where he goes and opens two schools in Seattle. Now, which story makes more sense? Why did Bruce Lee leave in September? So to me, he loses the fight in August. He gets his shit together and moves to Seattle with his family and his new baby boy. Kind of makes sense. Kind of makes you believe more that Bruce Lee lost that fight than him winning that fight. And Wong Jackman continued in San Francisco, Chinatown, continued teaching until 2005. I believe he died in, what was it? I can't remember what year he died, but he retired in 2005 from teaching. Bruce Lee was in Seattle. 2 years later, Bruce Lee opens a school in California in 1967. Not in San Francisco, in Oakland, out of town, across the Golden Gate Bridge. Bruce Lee's dojo in San Francisco, after he was beat out of town, my opinion, becomes a dental office. 50 years later, a second generation Jeet Kune Do student with the last name of Carr reopens Bruce Lee's dojo 50 years later. So I'd like to hear comments on what you delusional Bruce Lee fans think about this, because it's just too, this is no coincidence. This is no coincidence that, you know, Bruce Lee fights this guy in August. The rule is the loser leaves town. The loser leaves town or stops teaching altogether. Bruce Lee chose to leave town. He left in September. Now, this is fact. Not making this up. And I'm not trying to discredit anybody. I'm just using something that a lot of you delusional Bruce Lee fans don't use, which is common goddamn sense. Why can't you just understand that your boy was not superhuman? He wasn't a force to be reckoned with. He just wasn't. He's never proven that. He's never fought anybody that mattered. I mean, for that fact, Wong Jackman wasn't, you know, kicking ass all over the place either. He was nothing but a teacher as well. It's not he was fighting competitions and beating everybody's ass either. So we don't really know how good was even Wong Jackman. You know, it's not like this guy has not even Wong Jackman has a history of fighting, you know, real good fighters. I mean, he was a teacher, just like Bruce Lee. This was two teachers fighting each other for dominance to put a lock on teaching Kung Fu in Chinatown, San Francisco. And Wong Jackman won, and Bruce Lee left town. Common sense. Common sense. This is not rocket science. I mean, if you put all this stuff together, you know, if I challenge somebody to come here and fight me in my house and challenge me and I say, okay, and let's say the guy lives next door. And I say, okay, the loser has to leave. And I fight this guy. And a couple of, 2-3 months later, one of us is gone. You're only going to assume the loser left because that was the stipulation. If there's any honor, of course. And, you know, I mean, in the Chinese community back then, there was a lot of talk of honor, and they honored this and they honored that. So I think Bruce Lee honored the rules of the challenge, and he knows he lost, and he left the way he was supposed to. I mean, they asked Bruce Lee, about his boxing match when he was 17. That boxing match he won, that he did really poorly, but he scratched out a win. They asked him about that. He spoke of that freely. He said, I was very disappointed. You know, I could have done this and I could have done better that. But they asked him about this fight, and he really had no comment about it. And the story goes that Bruce Lee talked to Wong Jackman and said, no matter what the outcome is, we are not to talk about it. But Bruce Lee fans automatically assumed Bruce Lee won because he was Bruce Lee. And that pissed Wong Jackman off. That's why Wong Jackman came out publicly and talked about it. Wong Jackman said, I beat him. I beat Bruce Lee. And he won't admit it. He just Bruce Lee left it to the eye of the beholder and just to automatically believe that Bruce Lee won. You know. But the fact is, right after that fight, bye-bye Bruce Lee, left Chinatown, never to return. Common sense. Tell me what you think. Eddie Berrios, peace.